The moment Claire pulled me behind the wall, out of sight of the security camera, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her fingers were trembling around my wrist, and her eyes were filled with a fear I had never seen in them before. She leaned closer and whispered that she had been waiting for this moment for years. For one terrifying second, I thought she was about to confess something that would destroy my marriage. But then she placed a small envelope in my hand and told me that what was inside could change everything I thought I knew about my wife. I stood there frozen, listening to the distant sound of dishes clattering in the restaurant while the red light of the security camera blinked just a few feet away. I had no idea that the secret Claire had been carrying would force me to choose between anger and forgiveness, between the woman I thought I knew and the truth I had been too afraid to see. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change a person's life, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a story about forgiveness might reach someone at exactly the right moment. My name is Marcus, and at the time this happened, I had been married to my wife, Rachel, for 11 years. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, where the streets were lined with old maple trees and everyone seemed to know everyone else. Rachel and I had met in college, married a few years later, and built what I believed was an ordinary but happy life. We didn't have a perfect marriage. We argued about money, work, chores, and the little things married couples argue about. But beneath all of that, I believed there was something solid between us. Rachel's best friend, Claire, had been part of our lives almost from the beginning. She was at our wedding, helped Rachel through difficult years, celebrated our anniversaries, and knew more about my wife than anyone except me. I trusted her completely. That trust began to change when Rachel started coming home later and later. At first, she blamed work. Then she said she needed time alone after stressful days. I didn't question her because I remembered the promise I had made when we married, to give her room when she needed it. But gradually, the distance between us became impossible to ignore. She stopped laughing at my stupid jokes. She stopped asking about my day. Sometimes she would sit beside me on the couch while staring at her phone, as if the person beside her wasn't really there. I began wondering whether she still loved me or whether we had simply become two people sharing the same house. The worst part was that I blamed myself. I started working longer hours because I thought maybe she was disappointed in the life I had provided. I repaired things around the house that didn't need repairing. I bought flowers even though Rachel had never been particularly interested in flowers. I planned weekend trips. I tried everything except asking the question that frightened me most: was she unhappy because of me? Claire noticed. One evening, while Rachel was upstairs getting ready for dinner, Claire looked at me across the kitchen table and asked if I was okay. I smiled and told her I was fine. She didn't believe me. She simply looked down at her coffee and said that sometimes the people we love hide their pain because they don't want to become a burden. I remember those words because they stayed with me. I wondered whether she was talking about Rachel or herself. A few weeks later, Rachel suggested that we attend a charity dinner hosted by a local community organization. Claire would be there too. The restaurant was beautiful, with warm golden lights, polished wooden floors, and security cameras mounted near the entrances. We arrived together, but Rachel seemed distracted. During dinner, she received a phone call and quietly walked toward the hallway. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I finally stood up to check on her. That's when Claire appeared. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward a narrow hallway beside the service entrance. Before I could ask what was happening, she moved me behind a large decorative wall where the camera couldn't see us. Her breathing was unsteady. She looked as if she had been fighting with herself for a long time. Then she said the words I would never forget: she had been waiting for this. I asked her what she meant, but she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pushed the envelope into my hand. She told me not to open it there. She said Rachel was about to make a decision that could destroy our family, and Claire had spent months trying to stop her. My heart began pounding. The first thought that entered my mind was the one I desperately didn't want to believe. I asked Claire whether Rachel was seeing someone else. Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. She told me that the truth was worse in a different way. Inside the envelope were several medical documents, old photographs, and a handwritten letter. The documents revealed that Rachel had been secretly dealing with a serious financial problem after taking responsibility for a debt that wasn't hers. Years earlier, her younger brother, Nathan, had gotten into trouble and left behind a large amount of debt. Rachel had secretly been paying it because she believed helping him was her responsibility. She had taken extra work, borrowed money, and eventually fallen behind on our household expenses. The reason she had become distant wasn't because she had stopped loving me. She was ashamed. But there was something else. The letter was from Claire. She explained that she had discovered the truth months earlier. Rachel had begged her not to tell me because she was terrified I would see her differently. Claire had tried to convince her to tell me herself, but Rachel kept refusing. Then Claire learned that Rachel was planning to sell the house without telling me, hoping to solve the debt before I discovered it. I felt betrayed, but not in the way I had expected. I was angry that Rachel had hidden such an enormous problem from me. I was hurt that she believed she had to carry everything alone. And I was devastated that my wife had been suffering right beside me while I was busy wondering whether she still loved me. Then Claire revealed one more thing. She had been waiting for the right moment to tell me because Rachel had recently decided to leave town. Claire had convinced her to stay long enough for me to learn the truth. I opened the door to the hallway and saw Rachel standing at the far end. She looked exhausted. Her eyes met mine, and immediately she knew. She knew I had found out. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Rachel began crying. She told me everything. She told me how ashamed she felt every time I asked whether something was wrong. She told me she couldn't stand the thought of me discovering that she had damaged our finances trying to protect her brother. She said she had convinced herself that if she disappeared, I would eventually be happier without her. That sentence broke something inside me. Not because I was angry. Because I realized how close we had come to losing each other simply because neither of us had been brave enough to admit that we were hurting. I didn't forgive her instantly. Real forgiveness doesn't happen like that. I told her I was angry. I told her that hiding the truth had nearly destroyed my trust. But I also told her that I didn't want our marriage to end because of a problem we could face together. For the first time in months, Rachel looked directly at me. Claire quietly walked away and gave us privacy. Over the following months, we rebuilt everything. We met with a financial counselor. We made a plan to handle the debt. Rachel spoke honestly with her brother instead of protecting him from every consequence. I learned to ask questions instead of assuming silence meant rejection. Rachel learned that needing help didn't make her weak. Our marriage didn't become perfect. It became real. There were still difficult conversations. There were nights when old wounds reopened. There were moments when trust felt fragile. But little by little, we began choosing each other again. 1 year later, Rachel and I returned to that same restaurant. We stood near the hallway where Claire had pulled me into the camera's blind spot. The security camera was still there, blinking silently above us. Rachel smiled and asked if I remembered that night. I told her I could never forget it. She took my hand and said that sometimes the darkest moments in our lives become the places where we finally learn how much someone loves us. I looked at her and realized something I had never understood before. Love isn't always about grand gestures, perfect days, or never making mistakes. Sometimes love is simply refusing to walk away when the truth finally becomes painful. Claire joined us for dinner that night. I thanked her for telling me the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. She smiled and said she had only done what any real friend should do. But I knew she had done more than that. She had protected a marriage by forcing two people to stop hiding from each other. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes that broken relationships can sometimes be repaired, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach more people who may need a reminder that difficult seasons don't always have to be the end. And before we end, I want to ask you something personal. Comment second chances below if you believe people deserve an opportunity to make things right when they finally choose honesty. Because sometimes, the person standing beside you isn't your enemy. Sometimes they're simply hurting in a way you cannot see. And sometimes, the greatest tragedy isn't that someone made a mistake. It's that they believed they had to face it alone. Marcus and Rachel didn't save their marriage by pretending nothing had happened. They saved it by finally telling the truth, accepting the pain that came with it, and choosing to rebuild instead of destroy. Years later, whenever I think about that night behind the wall, I no longer remember the fear I felt when Claire pulled me away from the camera. I remember what happened after. A secret came into the light. A marriage was given another chance. And two people who had almost lost each other finally learned that love isn't proven by having a perfect life. It's proven by staying when life becomes difficult, reaching for someone's hand when they are afraid, and believing that tomorrow can still be better than yesterday.